My vocabulary project is to do a Google Lit trip about the book The Red Pyramid from Riordan. So we're going to start our Google trip in London at Cleopatra's Needle. And this part of the story, this is where the Kanes learn about the death of their mother. So it's a very integral part of the story. But it's a landmark that's not often photographed in things. So by taking a chance on Google Lit Trip and placing a marker here, students can get a feel of where it actually is, what it is, complete an activity about it, and have discussion questions as well for them to answer in a journal as they go through this trip. The next spot in the book that they travel to is the British Museum, where they encounter the Rosetta Stone. Now in Google Lit Trips you can travel between a street view, such as this one is, so they can see from the perspective of actually being there what it would look like, versus the aerial view. In this, they are going to actually go in and explore some of the exhibits at the British Museum before they fly across, hop in their reed boat, and travel all the way to Brooklyn, New York. Now in Brooklyn, they make the comparison and contrast of how the Nile River is much like the river here in New York, with the east and the west. So students can visually see the similarities and the differences between these two areas, which we're going to go back to the Nile in our next part. And they go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and see some Egyptian artifacts there, where they're able, embedded in the link here, to explore the Met and see some of the artifacts themselves, as well as more discussion questions. And now here we're traveling over to Egypt, into the Hall of Ages, which is a theoretical place in the religious connotations of it. So marked within the book that actually is at the Cairo airport of all places. So they travel through a sand tunnel and go into the sand. And you'll see I've marked a path for them to follow, which is in the story. They travel through sand underground and get to this obelisk. But it does actually exist in its original location. So in the story, it seems like that they're traveling a great distance, and they talk about that in the book. And the children, by mapping it on Google Earth, you can see the path that they actually take and where it leads them to, and follows with a discussion question about the Hall of Ages into the vocabulary of that eras and periods and gnomes. This is the first gnome, and then they travel to the 13th gnome. So looking at those particular words and giving them an actual visual connotation helps them through and understand and have more meaningful connection to the text. Now I've taken also again a street view of the Sphinx and the pyramids in Giza, so they can see from the ground up what it would look like in this 3D model of it that they have in Google Earth. And then we're going to zoom out, because they talk about the placement of the Nile River, which we mentioned also that they had there. So we're going to zoom out, and students can do this on their own and turn and see exactly where these important places were. Are they on the east, or are they on the west of the river? Where they are in relation to other historical places that are of great importance in the story and also in history as well. So this aerial view, we can see the Nile and the delta that's on the Nile, and you can, because I've bolded those things, you can see where they are in specific relation to them. While they were in Giza, they actually traveled to Thebes, which is now Luxor, in modern day times. So we get to see Sadie and Carter Kane. They had a great duel there. And they learned that they needed to find the Book of Thoth, and that's a picture of Thoth as it's symbolized in the book. He is an Egyptian god, and he wrote a book that the character Riordan happened to steal and is keeping in his library safe here in Paris. So now we are in Paris, and students can see the different architecture, and they talk about the architecture in the book of some of the buildings that are there. And you'll notice obelisks become a theme throughout the book, so students get to see how they are spread throughout the world. They talk about capstones, which is one of the vocabulary words that I have in one of the activities. So now this is the actual street view, so you can zoom out and see. In the book they talk about the names of the streets and how they're called rues, instead of streets and avenues. So by actually seeing this on the map, and you can click on and turn on street names so students can see how they're actually laid out in the city here in just a second. I believe I turn them on. Perhaps. But students can zoom out, zoom around, see where things are in there, other smaller places that they talk about in the book, to make a more meaningful connection to them. Okay, now we're going to zoom across to the United States. Again, to another obelisk, which is the most powerful obelisk in the United States, in Washington, D.C., our Washington Monument. Now there are several places that are in and around Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. historically was one of the first cities to be thoroughly planned out before it started to be built. So there's a lot of symmetry within the city. So we can check and see and check in on the Lincoln Memorial, where the where the White House is, where the Capitol building is at, the reflecting poles, and how those are laid out so symmetrically. And we can zoom in to see the architecture of those buildings to see if we can see any similarities and differences as well. The discussion question in this area is about why, what other places in this area you might think are magical or possess magical skills or opportunities for the Kanes to travel again. Why this is seen as such a great place for Mot, which is the goddess of balance and power. And why this city would be such a great location for her, to have her central power, because it is laid out so specific. Here you can see the great avenues running up and back to the Capitol, spread out in such a grid pattern in between of it. So students can actually visually see these implications here. From the Washington Monument is visited now in this part of the story, and then again at the end of the story, because they travel. I don't want to ruin the story if you haven't read it, but this is a great importance, and the significance of the balance and control becomes very important at the end. So we've got the book from Toth that we got in Paris. Now we need to go help him explain it to us, because we're not quite sure. And Toth is also the god of monkeys and baboons. So here we have a picture of a baboon that's integral in the story. And for some reason he has chosen the University of Tennessee to hold his power court. This is where he chooses to be, the library, and then also on the basketball court, which is where I chose to put our place marker for this. We get to meet Toth, and we learn all about Set, and how to defeat Set, which is what his book actually tells us. So now we are fully prepared, and the Kanes are fully prepared to defeat Set, and Set has made his home at Camelback Mountain in Arizona. Now here we learn this is an apropos reason for the book to be named The Red Pyramid. Set has designed a great red pyramid. Now if you can look at the map, it starts to make sense why you might name this the Red Pyramid, and why his pyramid was red, and why he chose this location for it. You see we have Red Rock North, there's Red Rock, and I might not show it on this map view here, but there's a Red Canyon around here somewhere. But this is called Camelback Mountain, and I chose this aerial view of it. You can also change the night and the day on Google Earth, so students can see how weather impacts the view of the city. But this is called Camelback Mountain because it looks like a camel laying down with the humps from it. So this is what where the final battle with Set is, and we learn that not everything, the whole trip has been about being possessed, and whether things are real or whether they're an illusion. So we discussed those vocabulary words: possession, illusions, what is real, what you think is real, and what you don't think is real. And since those are the major themes of the book, now we finally end back again to the whole world and determine what is the future of the world. So Google Lit trips are a great way to integrate literature into a real-world atmosphere for students if they're in places that you haven't even been to. It even is an application that lets you go to space, to the moon, to Mars now, since we've had such technological advances. It's a great tool if you can go to googlelittrips.org. There are several that are already created for you from your basic books like even Flotsam, which is just a picture storybook, and that one is designed by students, which is really neat. So you can design them yourself, or you can have students design them themselves. So I would choose to use this and have students start with this and then build off and maybe each take a place and expand upon it and do their own research in that area. Thank you very much.